Welcome back to the channel. Like and sub if you enjoy the video, thank you. Chapter 75, Shadows in the Dark. The tension in Chandrapur lingered in the air like a thick fog after Karen's arrest. News spread quickly, despite the quiet confrontation, and the village buzzed with gossip and uncertainty. People who had once admired Karen now whispered behind closed doors, wondering what had driven him to betray the village. Others defended him, convinced that there was more to the story than met the eye. Priya felt the weight of their stares as she walked through the village, but she kept her head high. She knew there was still work to be done. After Karen's arrest, Priya, Ravi, and Suresh worked tirelessly to investigate the larger network behind the sabotage. Karen had refused to reveal the identities of his contacts, but Priya was convinced that the stranger from the barn was key to uncovering the rest of the conspiracy. Whoever he was, he had slipped through their fingers once, but they wouldn't let him get away again. One evening, as Priya and Ravi were poring over maps and records in her home, there was a knock at the door. Priya's heart skipped a beat as she opened it to find a small, folded piece of paper lying on the doorstep. She looked around, but the street was empty. She quickly picked up the note and unfolded it, her eyes scanning the hastily scrawled message. Asterisk if you want answers. Come to the old mill at midnight. Come alone, asterisk. Priya's breath caught in her throat. She showed the note to Ravi, who immediately looked concerned. This could be a trap, Ravi said, his voice low. We don't know who sent this or what they want. I know, Priya replied, her mind racing. But it could also be our only chance to get more information. If this person knows something about the conspiracy, we can't afford to ignore it. Ravi frowned but nodded. You're not going alone. I'll follow you from a distance. If something goes wrong, I'll be there. Priya agreed, though she couldn't shake the feeling of unease in her chest. She spent the rest of the evening preparing for the meeting, going over potential scenarios in her mind. She couldn't let fear cloud her judgment, but she also knew that this was a dangerous game they were playing. As the clock neared midnight, Priya made her way to the old mill on the outskirts of the village. The building had long been abandoned, its stone walls crumbling and overgrown with ivy. The night was quiet, the only sounds a soft rustling of leaves and the distant croak of frogs from the nearby stream. Ravi stayed back, hidden in the shadows, watching her every move. Priya approached the mill cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She pushed open the creaky wooden door and stepped inside, the darkness swallowing her whole. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light filtering in through the broken windows. For a moment there was nothing, just the sound of her own breathing and the eerie quiet of the mill. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the same man she had seen meeting Karen at the barn, a tall, thin figure with sharp features and cold eyes. He wore a dark cloak that obscured most of his face, but Priya could sense the tension in his posture, the readiness for a confrontation. You came? The man said, his voice low and gravelly. Priya squared her shoulders, keeping her distance. Who are you? What do you want? The man chuckled softly, though there was no warmth in sound. I'm not the one who should be answering questions, girl. You've been meddling in things far beyond your understanding. You've been sabotaging the village, Priya shot back, her voice firm. People have been hurt because of you. What do you gain from all of this? The man's expression darkened. You think this is just about your little village? He sneered. Chandrapur is a pawn, a means to an end. There are bigger forces at play here, forces that have been working in the shadows long, before you were even born. Priya narrowed her eyes, her mind racing. What forces? Who are you working for? The man stepped closer, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. You'll find out soon enough, he said cryptically. But if I were you, I'd stop asking questions before you get in too deep. Some truths are better left buried. Priya's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't back down. You came here to tell me that? Or do you have something more to offer? The man paused for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. Consider this a warning, he said finally. You've uncovered more than you should have, but there's still time to walk away. Leave Chandrapur to its fate, and you might survive what's coming. Push any further, and you'll only bring more destruction upon your village. Priya felt a surge of anger rise in her chest. I'm not afraid of you, she said defiantly. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Chandrapur from people like you. The man's eyes flashed with amusement, but there was also a hint of something else. Something darker, more dangerous. You're brave, he said softly, but bravery won't save you. He turned to leave, but before he could step back into the shadows, Priya called out to him. Wait, she said. If you're so certain that I can't stop you, then why warn me? Why not just finish what you started? The man paused, his back to her. For a moment, he said nothing, and Priya thought he might walk away without answering. But then he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Because even pawns have a role to play, he said cryptically. And sometimes they're more valuable alive than dead. With that, the man disappeared into the darkness, leaving Priya standing alone in the mill. Her mind was racing with questions. But one thing was clear. Whatever forces were at play in Chandrapur, they were far more dangerous and far-reaching than she had imagined. She quickly made her way back outside, where Ravi was waiting for her, with concerned expression. What happened? He asked urgently. Priya recounted the conversation, her thoughts swirling as she tried to make sense of the man's cryptic warnings. Ravi listened carefully, his face growing more serious with each passing moment. We're dealing with something much bigger than we thought, Priya said quietly. He mentioned forces working in the shadows, something beyond just the sabotage in the village. Ravi nodded, his expression grim. This isn't just about Chandrapur anymore, he said. Whatever's happening here is part of a much larger plan. They walked back to the village in silence, both of them deep in thought. The confrontation had left Priya with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. The danger facing Chandrapur was far greater than she had ever imagined. As they approached the village, Priya felt a renewed sense of determination. The man's warning had only strengthened her resolve. Whatever darkness was lurking in the shadows, she wouldn't back down. She would fight to protect her home, no matter the cost. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Chapter 76. A Trail of Clues. The next morning, Priya awoke with a sense of urgency. The encounter at the mill had left her shaken, but she knew she couldn't dwell on the fear. The stranger's cryptic words played over and over in her mind, and she was determined to uncover the truth behind his warnings. After a quick breakfast, Priya gathered her notes and headed to Ravi's house. She found him already at work, sorting through a pile of documents they had collected during their investigation. He looked up as she entered, concern etched on his face. We need to dig deeper, Priya said without preamble. The man from last night, he knows something. There's more to this conspiracy than we realized. Ravi nodded, his expression grim. I've been thinking the same thing. We focus so much on the village, but we need to look at the bigger picture. If this is part of a larger plan, there must be clues we've overlooked. They spent the morning going over their notes, trying to piece together the connections between the sabotage in Chandrapur and the broader conspiracy hinted at by the stranger. The documents they had gathered revealed a pattern of unexplained incidents in neighboring villages, sudden shortages of supplies, mysterious accidents, and strange disappearances. It was as if someone was systematically destabilizing the region, but the reasons behind it remained elusive. We're missing something, Priya muttered, her frustration growing. There has to be a link between these events. We just haven't seen it yet. As they sifted through the information, a name kept appearing. Vikram, a wealthy landowner with extensive connections throughout the region. He was known for his ruthless business tactics and had been involved in several controversial land deals that had driven small farmers out of their homes. But nothing in their research directly tied him to the sabotage in Chandrapur. Vikram has the resources and the motive, Ravi said thoughtfully, but we need more than just a hunch. If we can find proof that he's connected to the sabotage, we might be able to expose the entire conspiracy. Priya agreed, but she knew they couldn't approach Vikram directly. He was too powerful, and any misstep could put them in even greater danger. They needed to be strategic, gathering evidence without drawing attention to themselves. We should start by talking to the people who've been affected by Vikram's deals, Priya suggested. If he's involved in something shady, they might have information that could help us. Ravi nodded. And we should also look into his business operations. who he's been working with, where his money is coming from. If we can find a connection between him and the sabotage, it'll be enough to confront him. Over the next few days, Priya and Ravi quietly gathered information, speaking to villagers who had been displaced by Vikram's land deals. The stories they heard painted a picture of a man willing to do anything to expand his influence, regardless of the cost to others. But despite the growing suspicion, they still lacked concrete evidence tying Vikram to the sabotage. Their breakthrough came when they stumbled upon an old newspaper article about a construction project Vikram had financed in a nearby village. The project had been plagued by mysterious delays and accidents, much like the ones in Chandrapur. The article mentioned a subcontractor who had been involved in the project, a man named Suraj, who had since disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Suraj might have been silenced, Ravi said, his voice tense with excitement. If we can find out what happened to him, it could be the key to exposing Vikram's involvement. Determined to follow this new lead, Priya and Ravi set out to track down anyone who might have known Suraj. Their search led them to a small, run-down and on the outskirts of a nearby town. The innkeeper, an elderly man with sharp eyes, remembered Suraj well. He had stayed at the inn several times during the construction project, often looking nervous and exhausted. He was a good man, the innkeeper said, his voice tinged with sadness. But he was scared, said he was in over his head, that he'd gotten mixed up with the wrong people. Did he ever mention who those people were? Priya asked, her heart pounding. The innkeeper shook his head. No, but he did say something strange the last time I saw him. He said that if anything happened to him, there was a box hidden in his room. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after he disappeared, I went looking for it. Never found anything, though. Priya's mind raced. If Suraj had hidden something, it might still be there. She and Ravi immediately asked to see the room where Suraj had stayed, and the innkeeper led them upstairs to a small, dusty room at the end of the hall. They searched the room thoroughly, checking every nook and cranny. After what felt like hours, Ravi noticed a loose floorboard under the bed. Carefully, he pried it up, revealing a small, metal box hidden beneath. Priya's hands trembled as she opened the box. Inside, she found a stack of papers, contracts, letters, and notes, detailing Vikram's involvement in a series of illegal activities, including the sabotage in Chandrapur. There were also receipts for large sums of money paid to various individuals, including Karen. "This is it," Priya whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is the proof we needed." With the evidence in hand, Priya and Ravi knew they had to act quickly. They made copies of the documents and carefully resealed the box, leaving it hidden under the floorboard. As they left the inn, a sense of triumph mixed with anxiety filled the air. They had uncovered the truth, but now they had to find a way to bring Vikram to justice without falling into the trap the stranger had warned them about. Their next steps would be critical. If they played their cards right, they could expose the entire conspiracy and save Chandrapur from further harm. But one wrong move could cost them everything. Chapter 77, A Dangerous Proposition. The following morning, Priya and Ravi found themselves in deep discussion at Priya's home, poring over the documents they had uncovered from Suraj's hidden box. The evidence was damning, tying Vikram directly to the sabotage and other illegal activities in the region. But exposing him would be no easy task. Vikram was a powerful man with deep connections, and any attempt to bring him down would be met with fierce resistance. "We have everything we need to expose him," Ravi said, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and concern. "But we need to be careful. If we go public with this, Vikram will come after us, and anyone who supports us." Priya nodded, her mind racing as she considered their options. "We need to find allies, people who are willing to stand with us and protect the village. If we try to do this alone, we'll be crushed. But who can we trust?" Ravi asked, his brow furrowed. "Vikram has influence everywhere. We don't know who might be on his payroll." Priya thought for a moment, then looked up with determined expression. "We need to talk to the elders of Chandrapur. They've seen the impact of Vikram's actions on the village, and they have the respect of the people. If we can convince them to stand with us, we'll have a much stronger position." Ravi agreed, and they set out to meet with the village elders. The elders, a group of wise and respected figures in the community, had been increasingly concerned about the strange happenings in Chandrapur. When Priya and Ravi presented the evidence they had uncovered, the elders listened carefully, their faces growing more serious with each passing moment. "This is troubling news," said the head elder, a stern-faced man named Bhaskar. "Vikram has been a thorn in our side for years, but this is more than we ever imagined. We can't let him get away with this," Priya said, her voice firm. "He's responsible for the sabotage, for the harm that's been done to our village. We need to expose him and put a stop to his plans." Bhaskar exchanged glances with the other elders, then turned back to Priya. "You're right, Priya, but this won't be easy. Vikram is powerful, and he won't hesitate to retaliate if we move against him. We need to be prepared for whatever comes next." The elders agreed to support Priya and Ravi in their efforts, but they urged caution. They decided to gather more information and carefully plan their next steps. The first order of business was to quietly rally the villagers, ensuring that they would stand united when the time came to confront Vikram. Over the next few days, Priya and Ravi worked closely with the elders, meeting with trusted villagers and sharing the evidence they had uncovered. The response was overwhelming, anger and frustration at Vikram's betrayal, but also a renewed sense of hope. For the first time in a long while, the villagers felt that they had a chance to fight back and protect their home. As the village began to organize, Priya received an unexpected visit from a stranger late one evening. The man, who introduced himself as Ramesh, claimed to be a former associate of Vikram's who had grown disillusioned with his ruthless tactics. He offered to help Priya and Ravi bring Vikram down, providing insider information that could prove invaluable in their efforts. Ravi was immediately suspicious. "Why should we trust you?" he asked, eyeing Ramesh warily. "You worked with Vikram. You were part of the problem." Ramesh looked genuinely remorseful as he spoke. "I know, and I don't expect you to trust me right away. But I've seen the damage Vikram has done, and I can't stand by and watch it continue. I want to make things right, and I believe that helping you is the only way to do that." Priya considered Ramesh's offer carefully. It was risky to bring a former associate of Vikram into their circle, but his knowledge could give them the edge they needed. After a moment of thought, she made a decision. "We'll give you a chance," Priya said, her voice firm. "But if you betray us, you'll regret it." Ramesh nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I won't let you down," he promised. With Ramesh's help, Priya and Ravi were able to piece together more of Vikram's operations. They learned about secret meetings, hidden accounts, and the identities of some of Vikram's key allies. But the more they uncovered, the more they realized how deeply entrenched Vikram's influence was. Not just in Chandrapur, but throughout the entire region. One night, as they were going over their findings, Ramesh hesitated before speaking up. "There's something else you should know," he said, his voice tense. "Vikram is planning something big, something that could put the entire village in danger." Priya and Ravi exchanged worried glances. "What is it?" Priya asked. "I don't know the details," Ramesh admitted. "But from what I've heard, he's preparing to make a move that will solidify his control over the region. If we don't stop him soon, it could be too late." Priya felt a chill run down her spine. The stakes had just gotten higher, and the urgency of their mission was clearer than ever. They needed to act quickly, but they also needed to be smart. One wrong move could spell disaster, not just for them, but for the entire village. As the night wore on, Priya, Ravi, and Ramesh worked tirelessly to finalize their plan. They would gather the village, confront Vikram, and expose his crimes to the world. But they knew that Vikram wouldn't go down without a fight, and they had to be ready for anything. The next few days would be critical. Priya felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but she also felt a deep sense of resolve. She had come too far to back down now. With the support of the village and the evidence they had gathered, they had a real chance to bring Vikram to justice. But as they prepared for final confrontation, Priya couldn't shake the feeling that the stranger's warning still lingered in the background. "Some truths are better left buried," he had said. She only hoped that in their quest for justice, they weren't about to unearth something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Chapter 78, The Final Countdown. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Chandrapur as the village buzzed with a quiet, tense energy. Priya, Ravi, and Ramesh were gathered in Priya's home, finalizing the details of their plan. The documents they had uncovered, along with the evidence Ramesh had provided, were their trump card. But the time to play it was fast approaching. "We'll confront Vikram tomorrow at dawn," Priya said, her voice steady. "By then, the entire village will be ready to stand with us. We have the evidence, and we have the people. He won't be able to silence us." Ravi nodded, but his face was drawn with worry. What if he retaliates? Vikram is dangerous, and if he feels cornered, there's no telling what he might do. "We can't think like that," Priya replied firmly. "If we don't act now, he'll only grow stronger. This is our best chance to stop him." Ramesh, who had been listening intently, finally spoke up. "Vikram's most loyal men are ruthless, but they're also greedy. If we can find a way to turn them against him, it might weaken his position." "Do you think they'd betray him?" Ravi asked skeptically. "If they see that Vikram's days are numbered, they might be more willing to switch sides," Ramesh said. "Especially if we can offer them something in return, like protection from the authorities." Priya considered this. It was risky, but it could work. "We'll need to be careful," she said. "But if we can weaken his support, it'll make tomorrow's confrontation easier." They spent the rest of the evening crafting a message to send to Vikram's inner circle, offering them a chance to come clean in exchange for leniency. It was a gamble, but one worth taking. As the night deepened, Priya found herself unable to sleep. She stepped outside, the cool air brushing against her skin as she gazed up at the stars. The village was quiet, but she knew that many of the villagers were lying awake, just as she was, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Her thoughts drifted back to the stranger who had warned her not to dig too deeply. Was this what he had meant? That by confronting Vikram, she was putting herself and the village in grave danger? But she couldn't back down now, not when they were so close to exposing the truth. The next morning, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Priya and Ravi made their way to the center of the village. The elders had already begun gathering the villagers, and soon a large crowd had formed. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and fear, but also with determination. They were ready to stand up to Vikram. Priya stepped forward, holding up the documents they had gathered. "Today we stand united," she said, her voice ringing out clearly in the still morning air. "For too long, Vikram has controlled us through fear and deceit. But we have the truth on our side, and we won't be silenced any longer." The crowd murmured in agreement, and Priya could see the resolve in their eyes. They were tired of living in fear, tired of being manipulated. Today, they would fight back. As they marched toward Vikram's estate, Priya felt a mixture of emotions. Fear, yes, but also a fierce determination. This was it, the final showdown. There was no turning back now. When they arrived at the gates of Vikram's sprawling estate, they found them already open, as if expecting their arrival. Priya exchanged a glance with Ravi, who nodded grimly. They pressed forward, leading the crowd onto the estate grounds. Vikram was waiting for them on the steps of his mansion, flanked by his men. His expression was one of cold amusement, as if he found their defiance amusing. "So, the villagers finally grow a spine," Vikram sneered. "And what do you plan to do? Overthrow me? I built this empire with my own hands, and you think you can bring me down with a few pieces of paper?" Priya stepped forward, holding up the documents. "These aren't just pieces of paper, Vikram. They're evidence of your crimes. Proof that you've sabotaged the village, stolen from the people, and conspired against those who trusted you." Vikram's smile faded, replaced by a hard, calculating look. "You're playing a dangerous game, girl. Do you really think you can win?" "We're not playing a game," Ravi said, stepping up beside Priya. "We're standing up for what's right, and we're not alone." At that moment, several of Vikram's men began to shift uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. Ramesh's plan was working. Doubt was spreading among Vikram's ranks. If they could push this a little further, they might be able to fracture his support completely. Vikram noticed the unease among his men and scowled. "Loyalty is a rare commodity these days," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "But it doesn't matter. I've always known how to deal with traitors." He made a subtle hand gesture, and suddenly, several of his men stepped forward, weapons drawn. The crowd gasped, and for a moment, fear rippled through them. But Priya didn't back down. "You think you can intimidate us?" she challenged. "We've come too far to be scared off now. If you want to fight, we'll fight. But know this, if you harm any of us, you'll be the one who pays the price." For a tense moment, it seemed as though violence was inevitable. But then, one of Vikram's men hesitated, lowering his weapon. Another followed suit, then another. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Vikram's eyes narrowed as he realized what was happening. "You cowards," he spat, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "You'll regret this." "Enough, Vikram," Priya said, her voice calm but firm. "It's over. Surrender, and maybe the authorities will show you some mercy." For a moment, Vikram stood frozen, disbelief etched on his face. Then, with a growl of rage, he turned and stormed back into the mansion. His remaining loyalists quickly followed, leaving the villagers standing victorious on the estate grounds. Priya let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They had done it. Vikram had been defeated, his power shattered by the very people he had sought to control. But as the adrenaline began to wear off, a new thought crept into her mind. What would happen next? Vikram was still a dangerous man, and there were still many questions left unanswered. The stranger's warning echoed in her ears once more, a reminder that the fight was not yet over. For now, though, they had won a crucial battle. The village had stood together and confronted their oppressor, and that was a victory worth celebrating. Priya only hoped that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would be ready to face them. Together. Chapter 79, The Calm Before the Storm. The sun was just beginning to rise over Chandrapur, casting a warm glow over the village as the people slowly returned to their homes, still buzzing with the thrill of their victory. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of hope in the air. Vikram had been defeated, or so it seemed. But Priya, Ravi, and Ramesh knew better than to let their guard down. After the confrontation at Vikram's estate, the villagers had celebrated. But Priya couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. Vikram had retreated, but he hadn't surrendered. He was a man who had always been 2 steps ahead, and Priya knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. As the village began to settle back into its routine, Priya, Ravi, and Ramesh met with the elders once more to discuss their next steps. The elders were pleased with the outcome of the confrontation, but shared Priya's concerns. "Vikram may be down, but he's not out," Bhaskar, the head elder, said gravely. "We must remain vigilant. He's likely planning his next move as we speak." "What do we do now?" Ravi asked, his voice tinged with anxiety. "We've exposed him, but he still has power. If we don't act quickly, he could regroup and strike back. We need to secure the evidence we've gathered and make sure it reaches the authorities," Priya said firmly. "But we also need to protect the village. If Vikram decides to retaliate, we need to be ready." The elders agreed, and they began organizing the villagers into patrols to keep watch over Chandrapur. Meanwhile, Priya and Ravi focused on gathering the last bit of evidence that would solidify their case against Vikram. Ramesh, still wary of his former boss, used his insider knowledge to help them stay 1 step ahead. Days passed, and the village remained on high alert. The tension was palpable, as everyone knew that Vikram's silence was more ominous than comforting. Priya barely slept, constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. One evening, as the village settled in for the night, a messenger arrived at Priya's home, breathless and wide-eyed. "There's been an attack!" he gasped, clutching his side as he tried to catch his breath. Priya's heart skipped a beat. "Where? What happened?" "On the road leading out of the village," the messenger said, his voice trembling. A group of villagers was ambushed. They were trying to take some of the evidence to the city, but Vikram's men were waiting for them. They barely escaped with their lives. Priya felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. This was exactly what she had feared. Vikram wasn't going to go down quietly. He was fighting back with everything he had left. "We need to get to them," Ravi said urgently. "If they were attacked, there could be more ambushes waiting for us." Priya nodded, already moving to gather her things. "Ramesh, stay here and keep an eye on the village. Ravi and I will go to the site of the attack and see what we can do." Ravi and Priya quickly set out, making their way through the darkened streets of Chandrapur. The night was eerily silent, the usual sounds of the village replaced by an oppressive stillness. As they approached the outskirts of the village, they could see the flickering lights of a small fire in the distance. When they arrived at the scene, they found the villagers who had been ambushed huddled together, their faces pale and shaken. Some were nursing injuries, while others were trying to salvage what remained of the documents they had been carrying. "What happened?" Priya asked as she knelt beside one of the injured men. "They came out of nowhere," the man replied, his voice shaky. "We thought we were being careful, but they were waiting for us. They knew exactly what we were carrying." Priya's blood ran cold. "Vikram has eyes and ears everywhere," she muttered. "We need to be more careful. He's desperate, and that makes him even more dangerous." "We managed to save some of the evidence," another villager said, holding up a battered folder. "But they took most of it. Vikram's men were ruthless. They didn't care who they hurt." Ravi clenched his fists in frustration. "We can't let this happen again. We need to find a safer way to get the evidence to the authorities." Priya nodded, her mind racing as she tried to come up with a plan. "We'll need to split up the documents," she said finally. "If we spread them out, it'll be harder for Vikram to intercept all of them. And we'll need to use different routes. Make it as difficult as possible for him to predict our movements." The villagers agreed, and they quickly set to work organizing the remaining evidence. Priya and Ravi decided to personally escort one of the groups, while the other groups would be led by trusted members of the community. As they prepared to leave, Priya couldn't shake the feeling that Vikram was still one step ahead of them. He had known about the documents, about the route the villagers would take. There had to be a leak. Someone close to them who was feeding information to Vikram. But who? Priya thought of Ramesh, but dismissed the idea almost immediately. He had risked too much to help them, and he had shown genuine remorse for his past actions. No, it had to be someone else, someone they hadn't suspected. With the documents secured and the groups ready to depart, Priya and Ravi set off, their hearts heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. They knew that Vikram wouldn't give up easily, and that the final confrontation was still come. But they also knew that they couldn't let fear hold them back. As they made their way through the darkened landscape, Priya's thoughts turned to the stranger who had warned her. His words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the dangers they faced. But they had come too far to turn back now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But Priya was ready. Whatever Vikram had planned, she would face it head-on. The storm was coming, but she would be the calm in its center. Chapter 80, The Storm Breaks. The morning air was thick with tension as Priya, Ravi, and their group made their way cautiously through the dense forest paths leading out of Chandrapur. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a twig set their nerves on edge. Knowing Vikram's men could be lying in wait, the plan to split up the evidence had been their best option, but also meant that they were more vulnerable, with fewer people to defend each group. Priya walked at the front, her senses on high alert. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. This was the moment everything had been leading to. Vikram was on the move, and the final confrontation was inevitable. The village's future depended on the success of this mission. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approaching from behind made everyone freeze. Ravi turned, his hand instinctively reaching for the makeshift weapon he carried. But before he could react, a figure emerged from the shadows. Ramesh, his face pale and drawn. "Ramesh!" Priya exclaimed in surprise. "What are you doing here? You were supposed to stay in the village." "I couldn't just sit back and do nothing," Ramesh replied, his voice tight with urgency. "There's something you need to know. Vikram's not just waiting for us. He's planning to burn the village down if we don't return by nightfall." Priya felt her heart drop. "Burn the village? How did you find out?" "One of his men, he's turned against Vikram. He came to me just after you left," Ramesh explained, his breath coming in short gasps in the rush to catch up with them. "Vikram's men are setting fire to the fields right now, and they plan to surround the entire village by evening." Ravi's face contorted with anger. "We can't let that happen. We need to get back and stop them." "But if we return now, Vikram will know we're divided," Priya said, her mind racing. "And if we stay, we might lose the village. We need to split up Ramesh suggested. "Some of us should go back and defend the village, while the rest continue with the evidence. It's the only way." Priya knew he was right, but the thought of splitting up again filled her with dread. "Whoever stays with the evidence will be even more vulnerable," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "I'll stay," Ramesh volunteered. "I know these woods better than anyone. I can lead the group to safety while you and Ravi go back to the village." Priya hesitated, but the determination in Ramesh's eyes convinced her. "All right," she said finally. "Ramesh, take the rest of the group and head toward the old fort on the outskirts. It's abandoned, but it'll provide some protection. We'll draw Vikram's attention away from you." Ramesh nodded, and without another word, the group split. Priya and Ravi headed back towards the village, their pace quickening as they felt the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on them. As they neared Chandrapur, the smell of smoke reached their nostrils, followed by the faint crackling of flames. The sky above the village was tinged with an ominous orange glow, and panic surged through Priya. Vikram had already begun his assault. They burst into the village to find chaos. Flames were licking at the edges of the fields, and villagers were frantically trying to extinguish the fires with whatever they could find. Buckets of water, wet cloths, anything to stop the inferno from spreading. But Vikram's men were there too, fanning the flames and blocking the villagers' efforts to fight back. Priya, Bhaskar, the elder, called out as he saw them. "We're being overrun. We need help." Ravi didn't hesitate. He grabbed a shovel from the ground and charged at one of Vikram's men, knocking him down with a swift blow. Priya followed suit, using a wooden plank to fend off another attacker. The villagers, emboldened by their arrival, began to rally, fighting back with renewed vigor. But even as they fought, Priya knew they couldn't hold out forever. The fires were spreading too quickly, and Vikram's men were relentless. They needed to stop Vikram himself. He was the key to ending this. "Where's Vikram?" Priya shouted to Bhaskar as they fought side by side. "He's at the old granary." Bhaskar replied, "He's using it as a command post." Priya's heart pounded. The granary was on the other side of the village, near the largest of the fires. If they could get to Vikram and take him down, it might be enough to demoralize his men and save the village. "Ravi with me," Priya called out, and together they fought their way through the chaos, dodging flames and ducking under blows as they made their way toward the granary. When they arrived, they found Vikram standing at the entrance, overseeing the destruction with a look of cold satisfaction. He turned as they approached, a sneer twisting his lips. "Ah, the hero's return," he mocked, his voice dripping with disdain. "But you're too late. The village will burn, and with it, any hope you had of defeating me. Not if we stop you first." Priya shot back, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Vikram's expression darkened. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long, girl. It's time to end this." He lunged at Priya, a knife flashing in his hand. Priya barely had time to react, raising her wooden plank to block the attack. The force of the blow knocked her back, but she held her ground, refusing to be intimidated. Ravi quickly joined the fray, trying to disarm Vikram, but the man was quick and ruthless, slashing at them with deadly precision. The fight was fierce, and for a moment, it seemed like Vikram might overpower them. But then, as Vikram raised his knife for a final blow, Priya spotted an opening. With all her strength, she swung the plank at his arm, knocking the knife from his grasp. The blade clattered to the ground, and Vikram stumbled back, momentarily stunned. Ravi seized the opportunity, tackling Vikram to the ground. The two men struggled, but Ravi had the advantage now, pinning Vikram down as Priya kicked the knife out of reach. "Give up, Vikram," Priya said, her voice filled with resolve. "It's over." But Vikram only laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think this changes anything? You may have won today, but this village is already lost. You've only delayed the inevitable." Before Priya could respond, the doors of the granary burst open and Ramesh and the rest of the group emerged, having successfully evaded Vikram's other men. The sight of them seemed to drain the last of Vikram's defiance, and he slumped in defeat. "We've got him!" Ramesh shouted triumphantly. The villagers, seeing their leader captured, rallied with renewed energy, driving off the remaining attackers and dousing the last of the flames. The fires were finally under control, and the village, though battered and scorched, was saved. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the smoke-filled skies, Priya stood with Ravi and Ramesh, watching as the villagers began the long process of rebuilding. They had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. Vikram would face justice for his crimes, but the scars he had left on Chandrapur would take time to heal. But for now, there was hope. The village had stood together, united in the face of danger, and they had come out stronger for it. And as Priya looked out over the smoldering fields, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they always had.